Today, we're talking about accountability and specifically the 5 levels of accountability. So, if you want to meet your potential or improve your performance, accountability must be at the center of it. Now, if we haven't gotten to know each other, my name is John Eades, and I study leadership and performance for a living. For the last 13 years, we've studied some of the highest performing leaders. We've written about those lessons in books and talked about them in podcasts and wrote about them on Inc.com, all in an effort to help you. And knowing accountability is so important for leaders at every single level of an organization. It might be helpful to start with a story. And maybe none better than the story of Kobe Bryant and his team, John Celestin. Now, if you're not familiar with John Celestin, that makes perfect sense. He averaged 2 points a game. But John cared about one thing, that was outworking his teammates. He knew that his discipline and accountability would be at the reason why he would be able to stay in the NBA at all. So when he joined the Lakers, he made a habit out of getting to the gym as early as possible. But here was the problem. Every day John Celestin walked in the gym, Kobe Bryant was already there working. John couldn't stand it. He kept trying to beat him and kept trying to beat him, and Kobe kept showing up earlier. Then one day in the preseason, Kobe Bryant broke his wrist. And John couldn't help but smile and maybe even be a little bit excited because he knew, and he didn't want to admit it, that the next day he would beat Kobe Bryant in the gym. So he gets there early the next day, and right when he walks in, there's a ball bouncing and there's a man inside, and it is Kobe Bryant shooting with his left hand instead of his right. And in that moment, John Celestin figured out that that's the difference between good and great. Someone that knows that they're going to be accountable to themselves and to others. Now, a great way to think about accountability is it's not complicated. It's knowing that behaviors are perishable, but accountability is the preservative. Your behaviors, my behaviors, they're perishable. They can change based upon how we feel. But when we're accountable to ourselves and to others, it shapes our behavior. And what we've learned in our work is that there are really 5 levels of accountability, and specifically how receptive one is to being held accountable. Now, the first level of accountability is resistance. This is when you actively avoid accountability and you're requiring constant external oversight to stay on track. Now, this is not the kind of accountability when someone's resistant that you want as a leader or on your team, because you're going to have to stay on them all the time to get the right behavior. But unfortunately, it's pretty common. And leaders settle for members of their team that are at this level 1 of accountability. The second level of accountability is dependent. This is when you perform consistently, but only under direct supervision or with immediate consequences in place. This is someone that quickly slips back into their old habits when the accountability isn't there. But when it's there, they do a pretty good job. They're not afraid to buy in and have the right behaviors in these moments. But when the accountability is absent, their behavior reverts. So that is level 2. Now, level 3 is where it starts to get interesting. This is when someone is responsive. This is when you're open and willing to accept external accountability. And you know that you're willing to do this because it will help your performance. And these people perform consistently when clear accountability structures exist. They know what the boundaries are, they know what's expected of them. They're willing and able to meet accountability right there. These are great team members to have because they're not going to revert back to old behaviors the minute the boss is no longer there. Now, the fourth level of accountability is someone that invites accountability. They proactively seek out accountability, using it intentionally as a support system for growth. Now, these are the kind of people that invite accountability in their life. They actually know they need the standard to be up here and they need other people to hold them accountable because it helps improve their productivity and their performance. Now, the fifth level of accountability, which is one you're probably the most interested in, is it's not complicated, but it is important and not everybody gets here. This is the level of ownership. This is when you've internalized accountability as a personal standard. You no longer require external accountability to perform. Now, this was Kobe Bryant. He was going to show up in that gym, irrespective of anybody else being there, because it was his standard, not anybody else's. Now, people that get to this ownership level of accountability, it doesn't mean they can't benefit from external accountability. It doesn't mean they're not receptive to external accountability, but they don't require it. They take ownership for it. They understand that accountability isn't a punishment, it's an accelerator. Now, I don't know what level of accountability that you currently have today. I don't know how receptive you are to external accountability, but I do know that accountability isn't a punishment, it's an accelerator. And I know that Kobe Bryant and John Celestin understood that accountability helped fuel where they were going. And as they moved up those 5 levels of accountability and they got to that ownership level, that's precisely where we're going to meet their potential. Now, is this easy? It is not. You're not superhuman, and neither am I. Which is why it's even more important to be open to external accountability in your professional and personal life. I was reminded of this recently. I was driving from Charlotte, North Carolina to Greensboro, North Carolina, and I was clipping along pretty good on I-85. And that means I'm going basically 20, 25 over. I had the music going. I had a guy next to me. We were kind of going pretty fast. I'd lost track of my behavior. And there was a gap in between the trees. And you might be familiar with that, where these police officers like to sit. But I wasn't paying attention. I'm zooming along. And all of a sudden, I looked to my left in that gap, and boom, there's a police officer. Immediately, my foot hit the brake. Immediately, the brake of the car next to me hit their brake as well. Now, luckily, in that moment, the police officer didn't pull out and put on his blue lights and have consequences for not meeting the standard of the speed limit. But it was a stark reminder that my behavior changed in an instant when there was some level of accountability and consequences for my actions. This is why accountability is so powerful. It is not just to be a police officer. It's not just to catch people doing things wrong. What it does is it realigns our behavior to the level of performance that is required. So now isn't the time to run from accountability. Now is not the time to be resistant to accountability. Now is the time to embrace it. Now is the time to invite it into your walk. Now, if you're a leader of a team, you know accountability must be at the center of performance because most everyone that I know and everyone that I've coached can benefit from external accountability because just like me, it's easy to get off in your behavior. Remember, it's not, it's your behaviors are perishable, but accountability is the preservative. So if you're in a role that you have direct reports or people on your team, you must know that part of your responsibility as a leader is to hold people accountable to the standards of performance. And the moment you're unwilling to do that is the moment you fail at leadership. A good friend of mine reminded me of this story. He was working in a bar, and the standard in the bar was that when people signed their checks, the bartender was supposed to grab the check and put it in the pile for all the receipts to have when they close. But it was kind of an outdoor bar and there was always wind, and every single day they would lose 10, 15 checks every single day. And their manager would kind of remind them of it, but it didn't bother him that much. He knew what the standard was, but he didn't enforce it. He knew the wind, he knew it was challenging, so he just let it slide. But one week, that manager was off on vacation and the regional manager came in. And the first day, he saw what was happening. He got the end of the day and he saw that there was 15 or 20 checks missing. And he goes to the bartender and he says, what happened to the 15 or 20 checks that were missing, the receipts? And the bartender said, oh, well, we do our very best to get them, but they wind blow them away and we're busy serving drinks and we're really sorry. We'll try to do better next time. The regional manager didn't accept that. He knew what the standard was. The standard was to get every single receipt and put them in the pile, irregardless of the circumstances, how busy or the wind. And he looked at his bartenders and he said, we really appreciate the work that you do here. But I need you to know that if you lose another receipt, you will no longer be serving behind this bar. Having those receipts is essential to us running our business. So whatever it takes to get our customers to sign those receipts and get them in the pile is exactly what we need to do. And if you can't do it, we'll find someone else that can. Do you know how many receipts those bartenders lost the rest of that week? 0. Because they took the accountability seriously. They knew this leader was not joking around, and it wasn't just for his health, it was for the health of the business. And they needed those receipts. The behavior immediately changed. Remember, your behaviors are perishable. Accountability is the preservative. This wasn't a leader being mean. It was a leader who knew that accountability was essential to get the right behavior. Now, I don't know what level of accountability that you're in today, but I do know that accountability is required if you're going to meet your potential and improve the performance of yourself or your team.